Welcome to Girl in the Gov, the podcast,
where our goal is to make politics more accessible and less intimidating.
The show features an interview with an expert in the political field, walking us through the many cues we have about politics, civics, government, and more.
By providing civic education in the places we are, on our phones, and in the language we speak. And yes, we know we say like a lot.
It's kind of the point, because politics needed a rebrand. Okay, welcome back to Girl and the Gov, the podcast. The first thing that comes to my mind today is Lauren Boebert, and
honestly, this is
just
the thing
wanting to chat about the OTPHJ that was seen around the world.
I have so many comments. One, who knew Beetlejuice was gonna just get like this PR moment?
Happy for them. But yeah, Lauren Boebert, that was such an interesting tidbit that I didn't see for my week, but was kind of greatly appreciated.
Okay, here's the question though that I have been pondering. I also have something
to say, but you go first.
Oh, okay.
I wonder what you've been pondering, because I've been pondering something as well.
I wonder if we're pondering the same thing.
Potentially.
That would be like, okay, so obviously like all the full steam is like headed her way, like because she's like this member of Congress, all the things she stands for is like in contradiction to this. And then it comes out that also the guy that she's on this date with is an owner of a bar that hosts drag story hours. And
I did not know this.
Yeah. Like apparently like is a big lib with a capital, not capital W, a capital L.
Really?
Yeah. But then in my head, I'm like also asking this question of like,
did he set her up?
I don't even see, that's not even where in my head. Well, it's possible.
He's trying to infiltrate the right. I've always had like a pipe dream of doing that too, of like dating some conservative and just exposing the fuck out of him. Sorry.
You are giving me so much nightmare fuel. In case I didn't trust anyone as it is, thank you. Thank you so much. Regardless of that, I was thinking like, what would this guy like, if it's not that, he's not trying to like infiltrate, what like sane liberal dude is just like, you know what? Lauren Boebert. Honestly, it's probably a fetish.
Yeah, it's probably like if you're into like hate sex or, you know, you like to like fight and make up, then maybe that was his MO. But honestly, more than anything, like the setting up situation like really checks for me, because it was a first date. Like she didn't know this guy. And
it was a first date?
Yeah.
Who goes to a theater date for a first date?
Great question. You can't talk, but you can get handsy. So
also so daring to get handsy in a packed theater. She's getting divorced. Maybe she's trying to get back at her ex. Like,
well, what I was pondering was that maybe she's trying to get back at Matt Gaetz in whatever situationship that they had.
Let me just ask. I was pondering, for the audience,
where's Matt Gaetz? What does he think about this?
This is Maddie's theory. This is Maddie's conspiracy theory, ladies, gentlemen. Okay, but
yeah, it's that I ship Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert together, and I think they've been having a secret affair for a while now. You know, now her divorce is happening, and it makes me think, interesting. I had this theory, and now she's getting divorced, and you know, maybe they had just some steamy affair, and maybe something's happening, or they're on a break, and she's trying to get back at him, and she's like, maybe it's a setup with this liberal, and they're actually, both of them are in cahoots, and they're like, okay, I want to get back at my ex. You want to expose me. Let's get handsy in this theater.
There's nothing like getting your ex jealous or fake ex jealous, like giving an over the pants hand job. It's
right. Or the way also like I've never gotten handsy in a theater, so I don't know like what the strategy is, but she didn't seem to have one. Like she also just like grabbed his hand and like just threw it on her chest. There was just no strategy, like no regard for what they were doing.
It's just strange. It's just genuinely strange from like every angle that you hit it at.
So strange that even Barstool made a video about it.
That's when you know.
And called out her hypocrisy. It was like, what do you know?
Which from KFC, who cheated on his pregnant wife, is real rich. So I'm just saying. But regardless, I did see that, and I put it on our story too, that Fetterman like had some Twitter words for it, and
Another
he
egg.
called it
Oh yeah, a hog.
like a hog. I've never heard of
That's
that in my life.
oh, I have.
Is this a thing? Okay.
All
So
my
this
guy
is like
friends
a
call it
I
a
live
hog.
under.
It's one
What?
of the many terms.
Huh.
A hog. Yeah. That was fucking another iconic reaction from him, which like I just
Does
couldn't
not
couldn't
mince
stand
words.
anymore. He's iconic. He's just changing the game. And there's also, all this drama around the dress code, everything being changed in the Senate, and he's really at the helm of it. And I just want more controversy from controversy. This is not even controversy.
Yeah.
It's like
Quote unquote.
just breaking the status quo that people
Right.
are like up in arms about. But more Fetterman, more. I need more.
Yeah. Also, low key, the actual dress code, like the changes to it, first of all, it's informal. There's nothing in like written in stone. Second of all, like it's not like a massive change to like what it is. It's not like it's going from suit and tie to come in your like underwear. Like it's just like they're
Yeah.
making it sound like, you know what? Actually,
Meanwhile,
forget the clothes,
Lauren
come in
Boebert
naked. Right.
tits out in the theater,
Right.
essentially. So please. I have also a story that has to do kind of with Congress and
Oh,
the government shutdown and everything. So for legal purposes, this is a hypothetical story.
I'm so scared. As the legal department of this podcast, I am shivering in my seat.
I'm going out of the country next month. My dad decided like
I was going to text you about this
a few weeks ago to renew my passport because my passport also just quick qualm about the government. My passport doesn't expire till end of November, yet I can't travel in October and be back before November. Stupid. Let's change that. So I have to renew my passport, even though it's not even going to expire by the time I get back. But I had a really tight window to turn it around because we kind of planned this trip quick and yada, yada. So I was going back and forth trying to figure out how I'm going to pull this off because doing it by mail was just like going to be too sketchy, cutting it too close. Like they could just never send me my passport back in time and I could be screwed. So in order to get an in-person appointment, you have to call and schedule an appointment 2 weeks before your travel date. And that way it's like urgent travel and you have to come in and they're like, okay, we have to take you. So that would have been like October 2nd or something. And knowing how our government works and how our Congress works, knowing the looming government shutdown that is upon us, I was like, okay, what can I do? My sister comes in hot with the most genius idea of all time.
Oh, God.
Again, this is hypothetical.
Okay.
Wink, wink. She goes, why don't you just book a flight to like Mexico or something for like next week and then call like get an appointment? And I go, that's genius because like on Southwest, just cancel it for free. So hypothetically, I ended up booking a flight scheduled for Thursday. I'm like, Mom, can I still go to Mexico? And got my passport last week and I'm good to go. Missed the government shutdown and really averted a crisis and found a government loophole, which I'm really proud of. So sorry. That's my story. Strategy around avoiding government shutdown because I would have not been able to go on my family trip because of Kevin McCarthy. So there we are.
Okay. First of all, that is genius.
Right?
Like mazel to your sister. That is so fucking smart. Dear God, from the legal department, I am going to have nightmares for the next eternity, but I already have them. So why not add? But I literally, it's so funny that you like him with this, or this whole strategy came to be because I literally meant to text you some point in like the last few days being like, so what are you going to do about the passport? Like, has your dad yelled at you yet? And I was going to say, because I renewed my passport. I kept dragging my feet because it's just annoying to do sometime this summer, I guess June. And it really did take like 8 weeks for them to get it back to me. And I have to say, which is funny that we're talking about IDs in this episode today.
Yeah.
Because I was like really, okay, there it is. I was like a little bit like nervous not having it. I have a license, I have other forms of ID, but just like not having it, like I always have a passport card and my license and my passport. It just was like, I almost like felt naked, if you will. Like it is a weird feeling. And I didn't have any plans or international trips on the docket, but I still just like felt weird without it.
Yeah.
So it does, for anyone that is looking to renew their passport, don't pull a Maddie. and wait
No,
till the last
do.
minute. Oh God. Do not
Work smarter, not harder.
Oh,
That's my life motto.
she's
Yeah,
not wrong.
pretty
She's not wrong.
iconic. And I got my passport today, and I looked really cute compared to my 17-year-old after soccer practice photo that I had for 10 years. So
There's
yeah,
no
here
way
we
mine
are.
wasn't worse. I hate to tell you, mine that I replaced, I had a slit in the middle of my eyebrow, like missing part of it. I looked like I was in a gang, straight up, like full
What
on.
happened?
And I also, I had this stress thing when I was younger where I just pull out my eyebrows. Not a good look. One of my best friends has it too. It's very strange. So there's like these pictures of us in college one point where like neither of us have eyebrows. And we're like,
Two peas in a pod.
Literally, like the way we found each other, absurd. But there was something very specific that I was going to say to the photo. Oh, I also like was really just like puffy in it, and I didn't look like me at all. And every single time I go to the airport, they really would give me like the rundown. I used to get pulled all the time, so I just like didn't look like my passport photo. And now I finally do, and I just feel.
I made the lady at Walgreens take like 10 pictures of me, and she was actually like so annoyed at me. She like was like, "No, you're done. You're done." I was like, "Okay, fine." I was like, I can't risk another bad ID photo because my license is not good either. And also, I don't even think my license expired. My license weirdly like lasted so long, and I still think I still have like 3 to 4 years left on it. And I got it, my pictures from when I was 16. So really odd. Speaking of IDs and passports, it's again perfect story for this episode, laying the context of just how difficult it is to get an ID, a form of identification in this country. My story is not even comparable to those of so many in this country who can't even get a basic form of identification. So we get into all of that. And this is episode number 2 of this topic with this guest. And we always say like this is our favorite episode, like sneaky. Like every time we've been interviewed and be like, who's been your favorite guest? We're like, oh, we can't pick, but it's Kat Calvin. It's the IDs. It's the IDs. Mind blowing. This is the episode. It's like round 2. And it's even better.
It's so good. And also part of this whole situation is that Kat is releasing, has released her first book on this topic. I actually have it right here. She's cute. She's pink. It's called American Identity in Crisis, Notes from an Accidental Activist. So she gets into all of the things that we talked about on this episode in depth, talks stories from the start, the impetus of everything to where this fight for getting IDs for all Americans is. There is a bill that has just been introduced in Congress. We've had info on it. You might have seen it in the GovHub newsletter. So we'll also put it, we're going to put it in Hot Mic'd again this week. So there'll be the action item, details on that bill, and all that good stuff. So definitely make sure to subscribe there and check it all out. And of course, pre-order. Oh my God, it's not even pre-order. I've been saying pre-order for a while. You can officially order the book.
It's live.
You should ask your local bookstore to order it for you if they don't have it in stock, all that good stuff. Kat is also on a book tour, and she talks to us about that as well. So all the good things. Anyways, let's get into it. Let's fucking get into it. Without further ado, here is Kat. All right. Welcome back to Girl on the Gov, the podcast, Kat Calvin.
Well, I am so happy to be here.
We are too, because first of all, our last episode we did together was what feels like an eternity ago. Like literally when we were still getting our feet wet, figuring out what podcasting was, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll come on your show. And we're like, oh my God, thank God. Like she wants to come on. And we didn't know if we were going to make it past, 20 episodes, 30, and you did. And we could not be more thankful. And we have to say, before we get really into the weeds here, is that next year, everyone will ask us, like, what's your favorite episode you've done? Like, who's your favorite guest? And literally, like, we're always like, it's our favorite child situation. We can't pick one. But if you're going to listen to one, it's the one with Kat.
No,
literally.
Actually, like, still to this day, we always tell people, like, don't go listen to our first episodes because we were just such noobs. But we still to this day are like the ID episode, Cat Calvin, all the things, and just was the most interesting, jaw-dropping episode. And I think still to this day is my favorite child.
Wow. So kind. And I'm just like so amazed at how you've grown the podcast. And it's been fantastic to watch. You guys are incredible.
Oh, thanks. Well, we are so happy, of course, again, to be here. And we do want to catch people up, though. For those that maybe they haven't gone to the archives, they haven't flowed their way down Apple Podcasts and whatnot. Can you tell us about Project ID Action? Like what you guys do, what the story is, like the sort of the elevator pitch or speech, if you will, on what y'all do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work in two different ways. We have Spread the Vote plus Project ID, our 501c3. And what we do is we work on the ground in 21 states, helping people get government issued photo ID. So there are 26 million American adults who don't have photo ID. And we work either individually or through partners, helping folks get all the documents they need, providing funds, transportation, everything required to help folks get an ID. And then during elections, we do voter education and turnout. Then we have Project ID Action Fund, which is our political arm, our C4. And what we do is try to pass policy to expand ID access. So we have a bill in Congress, the IDs for Inclusive Democracy Act, which would establish a free federal ID for everyone. We also have state legislation. Breaking news on you guys' podcast, I just that one of our bills passed the assembly is on the governor's desk that would provide for the unhoused. They are $41. So providing them for free is huge, and free birth certificates for low-income Californians. And so I'm so thrilled that hopefully, come on, Gavin.
Fingers crossed.
That will be huge.
It'll make such a huge difference. And that's really our goal, is sure, we're helping folks one-on-one every day, and that's important because people need IDs right now. But our goal is to make sure that every American just has an ID, like every other country in the world. This isn't an issue. And so by working on changing policy, with the swipe of a pen, Gavin will help thousands, if not millions more people be able to get vital documents and IDs than we can do one-on-one. And so we're trying to attack the issue on both sides.
Yeah,
totally.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I think in California, but obviously everywhere, it's going to be really huge if that passes. And something that, we talked about last time was kind of the mission of Project ID and how a lot of it had to do with like access to voting. And obviously like that mission like spread into so many other things. And we're curious to kind of like get the deep dive on what that is, and especially for those who like weren't able to be around the first episode with you, but hear something like, okay, IDs in California, what's that going to do? What's that going to do for people? Can you kind of explain how that mission spread and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So like most people, when I started this, when I thought about IDs, I just thought about IDs and voting, right? Like I've always had an ID. I've had a passport since I was an infant. There's never been a waking moment in my life when I haven't had valid ID. And so I started Spread the Vote because 2016 happened. It was the first major election without voter ID laws. We really saw what it did. And I thought, oh, well, there's no national organization getting IDs. I'll do that. And it probably took about 2 minutes after starting it to realize, oh, wait, there's bigger issue here, because everyone we were going to and saying, hey, you want us to help you get an ID to vote? And they would say, I need a job, I need housing, I need to be able to feed my children, I need IDs for that. Are you going to help with that? And I realized like, oh, that's the problem. That's the problem, not just with voting, that's the problem with everything. And so we really pivoted and changed everything to be able to help people get DMV IDs, but it really changed my perspective. And what I know now, 11,000 IDs later, 7 years later, is IDs are the key that open everything up as far as escaping poverty, as far as civic participation, as far as, one of the things that our clients say most often when they get an ID is, I'm a person again, right? As far as existing, really, you need an ID for jobs, housing, healthcare, to access the social services like SNAP or WIC or Medicaid that are supposed to help you back on your feet, right? To get a bank account Food banks require IDs often to get food. Shelters often require IDs to get nights in bed, right? Like if you want to just survive, if you want to open the door to a new life, to being able to be stable or care for your families, you need an ID first. And then that helps you access everything else. And so when we have 26 million adults in this country, it's more than the population of every state except California and Texas who don't have that ID. And it impacts them, right? So I live in California, I live in Los Angeles, where we have 75,000 people sleeping on the streets. It is an overwhelming problem. And we are the only organization that helps people get IDs, right? Like that's our sole thing. And so we're overwhelmed with the need. And everybody and every organization from the county and the school district and the mayor's office, everyone sends people to us because they want to put them in housing or in a job program or this or that, but they need an ID to do it. And so we're looking at not only the impact that then has on the unhoused folks or the under or unemployed folks or formerly incarcerated folks or veterans or whoever themselves, but on all of us, because if COVID taught us anything, right? We are all connected. Disease does not care about your gated community, right? Or what neighborhoods you live in. If we care about, crime, sure, right? If we, whatever it is, we care about just the tax base, right? Like the difference between what are we paying $26 billion a year in this country is the cost of homelessness, right? And that's versus the amount that we would make if we had people who had jobs and who had housing and who were able to put their kids in school, et cetera. So the impact is enormous because it really is everything. And when we're right now in a time in our country where we're seeing homelessness skyrocket and we're seeing poverty skyrocket and, child poverty is just like doubling, if every single adult in this country had an ID, it could just get a job, it could access services, then so many of those issues would resolve or they'd be on the first step of being resolved.
It's so wild how much essentially everything depends on this ID. And yet it's so before you, I mean, it wasn't seemingly
Nobody
part of the
talks about it.
conversation.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to fund all of these programs, for example, which we should do, and we should fund more, personal opinion, well, we need to be able to have those people access them. Like, what's the point of funding something that no one can access? Like, it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I'm just really curious as to why we don't just all have IDs in this country.
Is there a catch? Like, is this really like that obvious of like, for example, like in LA, the 75,000 people on the street, like how many, obviously, I don't know if you know that number, it might be overwhelming to, track all that, but like how many of those people don't have IDs and don't even have the access to like start getting, back on their feet?
Yeah. So I'll answer that question first. And then the question about why this obvious thing hasn't happened. When you're unhoused, it is almost a guarantee that at some point you're going to lose your documents because you don't have a place to put them. They will get lost. They will get stolen. We had 3 months of torrential rain in LA where everyone lost everything. Also, the cops throw away documents when they do sweeps, right? Like you don't have anywhere to put your things. And you don't have a filing cabinet to store your birth certificate in, right? You're lucky, right? Or a backpack that you always keep with you or whatever. So you're going to lose your things. And one of the things we see often with folks, which I'm very concerned about with this, skyrocketing evictions that we're seeing over the country, is that the second people get evicted, one of the first things that happens is they lose whatever documents they were able to take with them. And then they're done, right? Because then you don't have it. And so then and you may have a job when you get evicted, but it's very hard to hold on to a job when you're unhoused for obvious reasons. And so then if you need a new one, right? Or if you need your driver's license because you're living in your car or whatever it is, it's gone. And so it is a high percentage, and we don't have studies of, we don't even have accurate studies or counts of how many people are unhoused or how many don't have IDs at any given moment, but we know that it's a high percentage. And we know that, just from the work that I do in Skid Row, we also have people who just come back often because it got stolen, it got lost, the cops swept it, whatever. There is no catch, except that we live in a country that is unique in that we think you have to earn the right to be alive, right? We have universal health care, right? Like if we didn't, we wouldn't have to have active shooter drills in schools because we do something about the fact that children get shot. So this is on that same part of, this is a problem. It affects 11% of adults in this country, but it affects so many more people than, and only like something like 2 million people get diagnosed with cancer every day, right? Like 141,000 people get shot every day. It is a massive 26 million. It's a massive number, but we don't care, right? It's people we don't care about. It's people who are unhoused. It's returning citizens. It's former foster youth. It's seniors. It's LGBTQ youth, right? It's people we don't care about and we don't listen to. It's people who don't vote. They don't vote because we make it impossible for them, right? So you have all of that. And then on top of it, we also in this country don't recognize that a problem is a problem until it's been like 150 years. And this has really only been a problem at this scale since 9/11. After 9/11, because the 9/11 terrorists, the 19 of them had something like 36 IDs, right? State IDs that they had gotten validly. And so that there was an immediate freak out. And that's where Real ID comes from, where the 9/11 Commission was like, we gotta make the UID secure. Now it's 22 years later and it still hasn't actually been fully implemented.
And I still haven't gotten mine.
Yep.
Never going to be. But every single DMV in the country changed their rules overnight. Because for most states, it's not statutory, right? Like what kind of documents you have to show, et cetera. It's usually the head of the Department of Transportation or somebody, in DC, it's just Muriel Bowser, right? Like it's usually just a person or an office who can decide. And so overnight, they changed a lot. Like people don't realize the type of security and monitoring that's in your ID that you don't know about, the documents that change, the layers of like photo recognition. There's all of these things that they put into IDs and they didn't have to tell anybody. They just did it. But what it did, because another thing that we do a lot in this country is we defensively overreact. And so we made it so hard to get IDs that all of a sudden it made it really difficult for a big group of people who it wasn't before. So you used to be able to, like if you had an Arizona ID and you moved to California, you could just take that Arizona ID to the DMV and they'd give you a California ID. Now you need a full set of documents when you move to a new state. So if you have a hard time getting your birth certificate, then which 15 to 18 million American adults don't have access to their birth certificates or citizenship records. Well, now you can't get an ID. And if you go to Vital Records and ask for a birth certificate without an ID, they will make your life very difficult, right? And so the combination of it being a group of people we don't really care about and of this being an issue that is relatively new in this country and the fact that it is so hard and expensive and complicated to help people get IDs that there is a reason that I was the first person. There are wonderful local organizations that have been doing this for a long time, but there wasn't a national organization because it's really hard and it's really expensive. And I've done permanent damage to my health trying to make this work. And so, yeah, I just wrote the first ever book on IDs because I was the first moron who was like, I'll make this my life space. I just don't know why. I've chosen that. I could have done it. I could have been on a reality show, but here I am. And so I'm trying to beat that drum and trying to get people to understand, hey, this feels so obvious that it's stupid and it's hard to believe. And the numbers are hard to believe. When I first started, I would do trainings or speak and I would have people look at me in the face and call me a liar when I said how many people don't have IDs. And I was here's the data, I'm not lying. And a new study came out last November showing that the number has gone up from 21 million when I started, and that study was a few years old even then, to 26 million people who don't have IDs. And so, it's obvious, but it's ignored. And, every issue needs a person to shout until people hear. And so here I am.
Well, thank you for risking your mental health for such a crazy issue that I'm sure gets so frustrating and just can everyone just get it together? Can we all be on the same page about this simple thing? So you are doing crucial work and we applaud you over and over. Well, to lay some groundwork, we've talked kind of a lot about this, but to kind of get into a little more detail, you talked about this a little earlier, but what are some of the things that require an ID and why are they so vital to people quite literally surviving?
Yeah, I mean, so you could start with the basics, like a job, right? If you get a legal job, then you have to fill out an I-9. So you need your ID and either a birth certificate or a social security card or a passport or something. Housing, right? If you want an apartment or buy a house, get, whatever, you have to have legal ID in order to get housing. But particularly for the folks that we're talking about, if you are lucky enough to get a Section 8 voucher, which is really hard, you have to have an ID, right? And so like even the housing that helps folks, like we have agencies who call us because they have people who they've given Section 8 vouchers to who don't have IDs. And like, well, you're like, why is the government close that loop? Most forms of healthcare, if you get on Medicaid or Medicare, you need ID for that. If you want SNAP, if you want WIC, right? Any government program, SSI, you need ID for all of that. There, you also need ID if you want to get an education. So I just had a client who we just got his birth certificate because LA City College is the biggest community college program in the country. It's incredible. They have so much money that they have just nothing but scholarships. And so it's actually pretty easy to get an education, but you have to have an ID. And so even if you're trying to improve yourself and you're going to this great community college program, then they'll give you the scholarships for the books and the tuition. You gotta have an ID and you gotta have your birth certificate for that, right? And you need an ID to open a bank account. We have 61 million unbanked Americans. And one of the things, pre-COVID, I would never eat at restaurants that didn't take cash because it was a way of saying we don't want poor people here. But then COVID happened and now everybody's cashless. But for 61 million people who are unbanked, that keeps them out.
Totally. It's like all these little things, like everything builds on itself. Like
you can't mail a package at FedEx without ID. You also can't visit someone who's incarcerated. So we had a woman whose son had been incarcerated for 10 years, but she hadn't had an ID for 13. And until we helped her get an ID, she hadn't seen her son. It's so many things. It's just and that's just an ID, but you need a driver's license to get to work in most parts of this country. And so with the number of people we have who we help get driver's licenses because you need a job, and if you don't live in one of even a few major cities in America that have great public transportation, it's really hard. You can't get around. And so it literally is, we maintain this list of like things you need ID for, and people send us things all of the time. And sometimes they're hilarious. Sometimes they're serious. You can't visit a kid in most hospitals in the children's ward without an ID, right? Like there's so many things and we don't think about it. But my hope is that when people read the book, that they'll do what I do now, which is that I am very hyper aware every time someone asks me for an ID. And I'm usually like, I try not to be a jerk about it, but I usually will be like, just wondering what would happen if I didn't have an ID, right? Because you get asked for it so often, you start to realize like, oh, like you need to cash a check. The number of people we've had who have had a check, like a stimulus check or a social security check or something that they haven't been able to cash because they don't have ID. I've had unhoused folks who had the money that would get them into a safe place to sleep, but could not cash it because they didn't have ID.
That was honestly there were so many examples that blew my mind, but the housing, like being able to be in a shelter or the food bank, like both of those blew my mind. And so did also the one in relation to the VA. Like having a VA ID, like doesn't get you benefits from the VA. Like you also need an external form of ID to get that as well. Like, I guess if there's a question here, it's sort of like, how have these systems come to exist where they're like a circle? Like you can't, like you were saying before, it's like you need you need an ID to get your birth certificate. Like, did these designs just all fall and fail on each other? Like, how did this happen? I know the 9/11 thing, but like, is there something larger here or no?
Well, so the 9/11 thing is how we ended up with this huge population of people who didn't have IDs. But the systems, it's sort of typical American bureaucracy where everyone sort of makes these rules and everyone just assumes you have a thing. Then a number of years that I and my general counsel have spent on the phone with people with different agencies or different vital records office, trying to explain the concept that some people don't have IDs and they don't believe it, right? Like the number of politicians we're like, no, there are people who don't have IDs. Like that's a thing, and they just don't believe it, and they're just so unwilling to change. Every county in America practically has different rules for what to do to get a birth certificate if you don't have ID. And we talked to, county vital records who just refuse to make any exceptions for how to get a birth certificate because they just absolutely do not believe that there are people who don't have ID, right? And that's when you have 89% of a population that has ID, which says so much about the wealth of America, right? Like if that many people can go through this complicated process. But you have all these people, and we are segregated in this country by socioeconomic status. You are always either in a room where everybody has an ID or in a room where no one does, right? If you're at your book club or your kids' school parent night, I don't have kids, I think they have those still, right? Or a nice restaurant or whatever, everybody in there has an ID. Or you're at a shelter or in a community center or, maybe at a low-income rural urgent care or something where all or most of the people won't, right? Like we're so separated. But that means that people can go their entire lives and never be in the room with a person who doesn't have an ID, and certainly never have a conversation to understand what that means and what that looks like. And most of the people making our rules and making our laws, they're in the wrong room, right?
Yeah.
And we have a caste system in America. We don't think about the lower castes. Who cares? They're just people sleeping on the street who we walk by, right? Or kids who don't have, parents that we don't think about, right? Like, and so we make all these rules and we say, oh, well, everybody has an ID, so you have to have an ID to get this. And we don't think about the fact that 26 million people don't.
Yeah. I mean, that's why, I said even like what's the catch thing? Because it's like so many people like don't believe this. I remember when we first had you on, like I couldn't stop talking about this. And I just like, especially when talking about like the homelessness and everything, because I'm also in California and it's everywhere and everyone complains about it. And it's like, there's always the argument of like, people just need to like get a job or like, the bootstraps thing, all the things. And after like having that conversation with you, I was like, no, there's something so simple that's in the way. And it totally makes sense that people just like can't wrap their head around this kind of simple solution essentially. But it's just so crazy. It's jaw-dropping every time. But speaking of that, I actually just wanted to ask, like, so especially when you mentioned like your book, if there's anything that I guess is the most shocking you think that people like really walk away being like, what? Like, what's kind of the craziest like thing that you've come across in all of your research, all of your work?
Well, I think the sheer number of people is always the first thing. Like people just can't believe it's 26 million. I think the thing that is most shocking and infuriating to me and to people when I talk to them about it is the number of veterans who don't have ID. Because of the VA thing, because they're veterans, and you would think, right, like everyone thinks, well, all veterans have ID, and in fact they don't. And I think that it's such a sign of how widespread this problem is, because if there's one group, it's certainly not children, if there's one group that both sides of the aisle claim to care about, it's veterans. And so when we realize that even veterans don't have the thing they need to be able to have jobs and housing after they leave, and I've got in the book stats on like veteran unemployment and like how unbelievable it is. And I think that really like gets people to realize like, oh my God, like if we're not doing this for vets, we're sure as hell not doing it for like queer kids, right? Like we are not addressing this issue at all. And I think that for me, there's a veteran shelter here in LA that I go to regularly to help with IDs. And we just constantly have unhoused veterans who are clients who we're working with. And it's so frustrating. I'm personally, because I grew up on Army bases, everyone in my family is a vet. And so like just personally, it's frustrating, but also because it's just like, man, if we're failing them, we're failing everybody.
Totally. Well, I know in the book too, you talk about the amount of vets too that are on SNAP benefits. I believe it was 1.2 million. And it's like, if we, to your point again, it's like we have that many veterans that have to rely on SNAP. Like we're fucking up like hard. And then if we have Republicans that want to defund SNAP doubly, it's like, okay, like what's the real story here? But I do want to talk about what this looks like in terms of next steps, which is a bill, which is called the IDs for an Inclusive Democracy Act. I want to make sure I got that right. Can you tell us what the bill would do, how it would operate, and of course, like who's involved, like who are the parties?
Yes. Oh my gosh. This bill is my life's mission. And I actually, funnily enough, when I started writing the book, I was writing it thinking, I have to write a book that I could give to every member of Congress so I can get a bill. But then we got really lucky and got the bill in. So now the book is so that they'll hopefully, pass it. But the IDs for Inclusive Democracy Act it's in the House now. It's sponsored by Rep. Sean Casten out of Illinois, who is absolutely just incredible. And then co-sponsored by some amazing people like Cori Bush and Ted Lieu, my rep, and some just like really amazing reps. And what it would do is create a free and optional federal ID. So put us on par with like 99.9% of the rest of the world. Basically, right now we have state IDs, and like, don't fool yourself, they're basically federal IDs. Like, Real ID has proved that the federal government can step in and interfere with your state ID all they want, but it's still a state ID. And so, like I was saying before, every time you move to a new state, you have to get a new ID and you have to get all of the paperwork over again, pay all the fees over again, do all of that. And so we want to avoid that. So the federal ID would be free for Americans over the age of 14. It would be distributed not in DMVs, but in post offices and libraries, which is huge because not only there's too much traffic at the DMV anyways, right? And there's state agencies. Post offices already do passports, so they know how to manage the whole ID process, the applications, etc. Libraries and librarians, first of all, they're the greatest human beings on earth, but they also are real centers for supporting the vulnerable. So much that a lot of libraries are starting to hire social workers because they support so many people. And who has time to sit down and help someone fill out an application and get an ID? A librarian does. And they're going to be nice and probably give you a cookie and a library card, right? And there are also so many more post offices and libraries in the country than DMVs by a factor of tens of thousands. And so particularly when you're looking at rural areas, there may be one DMV in an area and 20 post offices, right? And so by expanding that, we expand access, we make them free. What documents will be required will be determined after it is passed, because the last thing that we want Congress doing is debating like residency document requirements for an ID.
Yeah. No way.
So, the goal is to have a committee of stakeholders from all different, venues, right, and touch points who can all come together to create sort of an ideal process, or as ideal as you can get when dealing with the government. But the goal then is that you'd have a federal ID that you can use on your I-9. So you can use it for jobs, you can use it for government benefits, you can use it for travel, you can use it for everything. It's federal, so you don't need a new one when you move to new states. It's free, so if you lose it, if it gets stolen, whatever, you can just go to the library or the post office and get a new one. It would, of course, be secure. I mean, that the security issue, at this point, we know how to make ID secure, right? Everybody's got a social security number. Like that is a thing that we aren't even really that challenged by, but it would really overnight solve this problem, because 26 million adults, and it would really be 30 something million. We haven't done all of the numbers yet, but it could, because of the age group that we would be expanding it to, it would be tens of millions of people who would be able to just have a free ID and then get a job, and like all of these issues would be solved. Like, you could put my book in the shredder, we would not need it anymore.
No,
Yes.
totally. And except for not totally at the shredding the book, because we love the book. So just putting that out there. But I do love the whole concept of having this at libraries and at post offices, because not only, like you said, like the numbers, but just the amount of layers and steps that takes to get to a goddamn DMV. Like the cost of trying to get an Uber there, a car there, public transportation, having the time off if you do have a job or you have a job under the table to get there. Like, it's just, that's a whole nother barrier in and of itself. So the access point, I think, is so key about this whole thing.
It was a big thing for us, and Rep. Casten and his team are just so amazing and have been so incredible about sort of every step of the process and really listening to us and letting us sort of write the bill that made the most sense. And it was so key that we put this in places that were actually accessible and that could actually be helpful for folks regardless of their situation. There was a suggestion early on that it should be distributed by the Social Security Administration. And I was like, have you been to a Social Security? That's rather have it be. It is, they are, look, people at the SSA are hardworking people, but the circumstances that they are put into are worse than the DMV. It's a real nightmare. And like the absolute last place that anyone on earth wants to go. And our goal with this was not to put these in a place that was going to be so difficult to get to. Not to mention that a lot of SSAs are in federal buildings where you need an ID to get in anyways. But we were like, look, libraries, first of all. Yeah. Everybody's happy. People are already there. Librarians are great. And post offices are everywhere. And they already know how to do this. And so that, we're really trying to think about how is this realistic? And this is why it's helpful to have, us, and we have tons of partners and stakeholders who work with folks who need IDs. And so we know the situation on the ground because this is what we do. And I can say, hey, I know that this will work or this won't, because I literally was on Skid Row yesterday taking someone to get an ID. Like this is what I do for a living. And so I think so often we have laws that are written by folks who have not been on the ground. And this is really, we're trying to do it bottom up.
Yeah. Well, to get political for a second, I had a question about the political landscape of passing this, especially because my mind goes to the voting rights bill that, is forever just stuck in oblivion. And especially how even voting access has become a partisan issue, oddly. So obviously this could open the door to a whole new voting block to also be opened up, which threatens certain folks. So I'm just kind of curious what some of the political pushback you have gotten on this, and kind of and also looking ahead, what kind of political persuasion needs to happen in order to get something like this past the finish line.
Sure. So here's the thing about this. It would be a federal ID. And so certainly in every state, so right now, every state has federal and state elections at the same time because it makes the most sense. So were that to happen, then sure, anyone who had this ID could use it in those elections. There are some there's Texas, which has a plan in place to separate their elections and have federal elections on one day and state elections on the other day, so they can block any state people out who don't fit the requirements. And then that would happen. But what this bill does, and what we're focusing on it's a jobs bill. It's an economy bill, right? It would help 26 million American adults be able to get jobs. It would reduce recidivism. It would help veterans get jobs and housing. It would reduce homelessness. It would reduce crime, right? There's so many things that this would do. And my thing is, if every single person who got this ID got a job, then they could get a state ID, and then they could vote in Texas' state-only election or whatever, right? Goal and the way that we were talking about this, and we have been fortunate so far, and I mean, I can get a little bit into more of the politics, but that there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who get that this is about jobs. Politicians of all stripes understand what it means for the economy when 26 million adults can't legally get a job, right? And what it would mean. We spend $25 billion a year, maybe 26, on homelessness in this country. It would cost, according to my calculations with my, little pink calculator. So it's not OMB. They're doing a financial study on this, but it probably $1 billion, maybe $2 billion to give everyone an ID. And then how many people would have jobs, right? And then we have taxes that would be coming in that aren't coming in instead of, unemployment that people may or may not be collecting. And, we would significantly reduce the homeless to prison pipeline, which is serious, right? All of these things. And so when we look at all of that, in so many ways, for a lot of people, that outweighs the idea that people are going to be able to vote. And, if 36 states require IDs to vote, then the federal government should just give everyone an ID to vote. So that's the other thing, right? But we are really focusing on this as a jobs and economy bill, because that's really what it is. I think that, though, the challenge right now is that there are reasonable people on both sides. There's unreasonable people, but people who sort of get the logic of more jobs a better economy on both sides. And have the percentage of folks who are really only in Congress to cause trouble and for whom logic means nothing. And we have to deal with the fact that they not only exist, but right now have a lot of power. And so what we are trying to do is on the House side, get as many members as possible signed on to supporting the bill. On the Senate side, we're working right now to get a senator to sponsor a Senate side of the bill. It's also a 10,000 Schoolhouse Rock really misled me in how easy it would be to get a bill through Capitol Hill. It is complicated AF. I have spent the last 2 years reading. First of all, there are almost no books on how to do this, but reading, there's Act of Congress, and this book it's great, but it's hilarious because it's about the Dodd-Frank bill. And the thing that I don't have that Dodd and Frank did is that they were Dodd and freaking Frank. They've been in Congress for 100 years. Of course, they got the bill passed.
They have a little leg up, just slight benefit.
I'm just looking at Ralph Nader, who's my, legislative hero, and how did you do it, Ralph? And it's well, I'm Nader Raiders, but it is a long, complicated process, but we're look, we're going to get as many people on the House as we can. We're going to get a Senate side bill, and we're going to keep watching for what happens. We've got a presidential in November, which, we could see how that moves the House and swings the balance of Congress. Every 2 years, one of the great things is every 2 years, Congress switches around. And so we'll see what happens. And as soon as we get a House and members of our committee who are not purely in office to cause chaos, then we will have a good chance at getting all other members or a majority of members of both parties to really support this bill. Because it's really that 2% of people who just want to burn things down and can't be reasoned with who we're really concerned with.
Totally. Well, I think there's something also to be said about just knowing when to walk away from an argument, not even bothering to reason with. We talked to Frady Reese at Unchained at Last a few weeks ago, and she was talking about some conversations she had with reps about forced marriage and just being at a certain point, you're I can't reason with crazy. It's not worth your time. There's people to reason and have conversations with. So I think that's one bucket. The other thing in terms of the economy thing, I don't know if you guys are aware of this CapCut template that has Biden in it. And it's him being it's good for the economy. It hurts no one. It helps everyone. And that is literally what's been running through my head. The second you said economy, I will have to share it with you guys because it's this to a T. But in terms of next steps, what can people do to help get their reps on board, to co-sponsor, to get attention for this? What is needed? What's that next step?
Yeah, so you can go to id4id.org. It's the website for the bill. And on it, you can see the text of the bill, see more information, but there is a section that has info on how to get in touch with your rep and scripts to either call, text, email, send letters, whatever, to ask them to support the bill. So please, please, please go to id4id.org. You could also, if you'd like, you can donate to Project ID Action Fund as we are trying to marshal the resources to push this ahead.
Yeah.
And everyone, buy the book. Tell someone to buy the book because I really believe, I tried to make it's short. You can read it in a weekend. I threw in some jokes. It's pink. I wanted to make it accessible and interesting and not just a boring political tome. I have some books by people who are my real heroes, but they're 500 pages of words on voting. And I'm just I'm not going to get through this, And
I know.
Done. And what I really want is for people to read this and get it and be oh my God, I didn't know this was an issue, and call 3 of their friends and be have you read this? Did you know, the reason that this guy is sleeping on our sidewalk might be that he doesn't have an ID, so he can't get a job or a place to sleep, right? And for people to get that. And I really feel the more people, I very rarely talk to people about this issue and have them not care. It's just that people don't know. But once you know, you do know this, right? Because you heard before, then you're oh my God, and then you can't stop thinking about it. And when there's a solution that's there's already a right, which is so thrilling for me. Is that this book, I could say in this book, we have a bill. it's there. We just have to support it. Like, this is a thing we can solve, and the solution is already in existence, and we can do this. And it's, I think we feel like we can't do big things in this country anymore, but we can. This is a thing we can actually do.
Totally. And it is quite literally like 16 birds, one stone, like the way that this issue can solve so many other issues is everything. And hopefully, people get the book and like understand that for themselves and pass along and like make this issue known. I think like you're so right. Like when people know about this, you can't stop thinking about it. I am like case study number 1, Sam's case study number 2. And here we are. But is there anything else we can send people off with like where to find the book, where to find you, social media, all the things?
Yes. So the book is called American Identity in Crisis, and it's for sale everywhere. Go on. Look, here's the thing. If you buy it from Amazon, make yourself feel better by writing a review, which actually is very helpful and counteracts the money that you're giving to Jeff Bezos. But it's also in independent bookstores. You can also call your local bookstore or your library and ask them to stock it if they're not already. You can find me at Cat Calvin LA, and I'm actually going on a book tour that kicks off in New York on Monday. So if you go to Cat Calvin LA on Instagram or catcalvin.com, my website, I've got all of the book tour dates. And so hopefully I'll be in a city near you. I'll be in Austin, Minneapolis, Nashville, New York, DC, LA, Portland, Phoenix. I'm probably missing something. That you can
San
come
Francisco?
out. We are working on a San Francisco date, so hopefully.
Okay. No.
With the book tour is every single stop I'm doing with either a local elected official or like a leader in the homelessness space, so that we can talk about how do we actually solve this problem in Phoenix or in Austin or whatever. So that it's about the book, but it's really about how can the people who are in this room make a difference right now. And so I'm really excited about that. So it'll hopefully be something that galvanizes people to make change in their neighborhoods.
Totally. I love how it's all coming together. This is so exciting. And I can say, as someone that read the book in possibly a record 4 hours, not to brag, that it is amazing. It is so good. I couldn't put it down. I also tried to like beat my record. So it was like one of those things. But seriously, so good, so iconic. Everyone go get the book. And thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your support. You're the first person who read it. You actually got your copy before I got mine, which I was a little so great about it. I was like, it's fine if it had to be anybody. But no, I appreciate you guys so much, and really, really thank you. It's so terrifying putting something out there and just being like, oh my God, are people gonna think this book sucks? Because like my mom read it and liked it, but she's my mom, of course she did, right? And like have it out there, to have you guys be so positive about it so early, it's made me like so excited to get out there and actually like do a book tour and not be afraid that people are gonna either not show up or like throw things at me because it's a terrible book. So
oh my God, if anyone throws something at you, call me.
I'll be on my way.
I'll take care of this. Yeah.
Thank you so much.